I'm not super familiar with it. It's a little, I think it's the reason why it was proposed in the first place is because that's how it was originally conceptualized the first time around.
Good morning. Please take a seat.
No.
September 10th, 2008. I want to welcome everybody to today's committee meeting. We have a quorum. I'm joined by two dear friends and colleagues, Mr. Ed Reyes and Mr. Tony Cardenas. We have several items on today's agenda, many of which, and we now have been joined by Councilwoman Jan Perry. We have many items on the agenda that I believe we can move with quickly. So with that said, Ms. Barclay, why don't you read item 1?
Good morning, Mike Barclay with the CLA's office. Item 1 is a report from the Community Redevelopment Agency and the City Administrative Officer awarding various consulting contracts in the Council District 9 corridors south of the Santa Monica Freeway redevelopment project area.
Okay, on item 1, we'll adopt the CAO report. Item 2.
Item 2 is a report from the CRA relative to the status of funding for the New Generation Fund. We recommend that this report be noted and filed inasmuch as no recommendations are required for action at this time.
Okay, so then we'll receive and file the CRA report. Item 3.
Item 3 is a report from the CRA relative to its quarterly land acquisition fund activity report. We also recommend that this report be noted and filed inasmuch as no recommendations are required for action at this time.
Okay, and item 3, we'll receive and file the CRA report. That brings us to item 4.
Item 4 is a report from the CRA relative to resolutions for tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds for the Angeles Plaza project. The CAO report on this matter is forthcoming. We recommend that the committee move the CRA report to council, and at which point the CAO report will be available for consideration.
All right, so then we will adopt the CRA report then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Item 6.
Item 6 is a report from the CRA and the Chief Legislative Analyst relative to an owner participation agreement with Lancashire NoHo for the construction of a mixed-use project.
Okay, then on item 6, we'll adopt the CLA report, bringing us to item 7.
Item 7 are reports from the CRA and the CAO relative to providing up to $100,000 of AB 1290 funds to the Department of Public Works for the installation of street-related public improvements at the Watts Learning Center.
Okay, then on item 7, we'll adopt the CAO report. Brings us to item 8.
Item 8 are reports from the CRA and the CLA relative to extending the exclusive right to negotiate agreement with Snyder RECP Valley Plaza for the revitalization of the Valley Plaza Shopping Center.
Okay, item 8, we'll adopt the CLA report. Item 9.
Item 9 are reports from the Los Angeles Housing Department and the CAO, Resolution and Tax Equity Fiscal Responsibility Act of 1982 hearing minutes relative to the Bonnie Bray apartment homes.
Okay, item 9, we'll adopt the CAO report. We will continue item 10. That brings us to item 11.
Item 11 are reports from CDD and the CAO and a resolution relative to the issuance of tax-exempt industrial development bonds for the benefit of Drapes for Show, Inc.
Okay, then on item 11, we'll adopt the CAO report. That brings us to item 12.
Item 12 is a motion Garcetti Zine relative to reprogramming community development block grant funds from the Fountain Avenue Park project to the Camino Nuevo Charter Academy.
Okay, so we won't hold since Garcetti has Zine on the motion, we won't hold that against him. So we will adopt the motion on item 12. Item 13.
Item 13 is a motion Huizar Cardenas relative to the transfer of $350,000 from the Community Redevelopment Agency to the Board of Public Works for the Adelante East Side Clean and Safe program.
Whose motion is this?
Councilmember Huizar.
Councilmember
Huizar.
Huizar. What do you think, Mr. Cardenas?
I seconded only because he asked me, but I think it's all right.
Okay. Then on item 13, we'll adopt the motion. Item 14.
So much love.
Yeah. Item 14.
Item 14 is a motion Cardenas Gruel relative to directing the CRA to create a legally required redevelopment survey area within council districts 2 and 6.
Okay, now this one we have absolutely no problem in moving. So we'll adopt the motion on item 14. And I think that brings us to, well, you know what? Why don't we get rid of some of, I think I have, let me see. I've got two public comment cards, so why don't we take public comment, and that would be Mr. Chuck Tenant, followed by Noel Weiss, and Mr. City Attorney, would this be a proper time for me to indicate that I am not a Raiders fan? Would this be appropriate?
Yes, it would.
And I did not cry Saturday night after the first 6 doggone minutes of the game. Anyway, Chuck, welcome.
Good morning, Herb Wesson and committee members. You know, I asked Ed Reyes a question this morning. If he could pick one passion for this city, what would it be? He said, housing for everyone. God bless him.
God bless him.
1 year ago, Herb Wesson was very instrumental in getting $5 million to the LAHD.
No, that was this whole committee, Chuck. Mr.
I mean,
Cardenas jumped, and I'll hold your time. This committee just aggressively moved forward.
I
to do
apologize,
that. So-
and I did have that down here, but I can't read my own writing.
Oh, and we're joined by Councilman Garcetti. I didn't see it. Chuck, don't worry about your
goes-
time. I'll give you Noel's time.
All right.
No,
They
be
gave
happy
this-
for that, Chuck.
They gave this committee got $5 million to the LAHD so that their down payment purchase assistance program would not fail and save the dreams of people on the waiting list. And you know what? It's sad that a year later, the program failed because of lack of funding. And also, the LA Neighborhood Services are losing their contract and the rehab. And you know what? It's a funny thing. Mercedes Marcez always talks about money. Well, you know what? I'd like to ask her, she's not here, give me the number to the federal representative, and I'll give him a call, and I'll talk to him. And I'd like to do that because, you know what? It's really sad. All that effort and what happens, some of the dreams go down. Also, 1.5 years ago, 54 people were evicted from a building on Magnolia, the Magnolia Project, to be replaced by 12 affordable housing. Yet the building sits decayed with vermin, and the developer lost his loan in that, and he's trying to get an SB 1818. And you know what's sad about that? Magnolia Boulevard sets a precedence in this city on how poor planning, lack of sharp, skilled people in there who slide projects through, how to destroy a neighborhood, how to remove affordable housing, unsafe street conditions, and poor water storm drainage. And yet Sergio Valdez, city planner, told me we must pass everything because regardless, it's our job, and if we don't approve it, the city gets sued. Shame on you.
Are you finished? Because I would give you more time.
Okay, I did want to
Go on, because I
Okay,
took.
all right.
about
On the
11
issue with the
seconds.
SB 1818, you know, on those buildings sitting there, do a TOPA project. Let the tenants buy a building that's sitting there. It looks horrible for the neighborhood after 1.5 years, and yet I can't see how on the SB 1818 you get 2 filings. If somebody has a track map for condos and it fails, now all of a sudden they want to do apartments. And you know what? And they're doing both, and they're advertising it at Remax Real Estate, both condos and apartments, yet it wasn't approved. And is this the way they do things?
Thanks, Chuck. Mr. Weiss.
Thank you, Councilman Weston.
Good morning.
And members, good morning. And by the way, I think on, you know, a lot of these speculator blight deals where the lenders may be taking back these properties, it is a good opportunity for the tenants to end up buying these properties. And I'm getting calls to that effect, and maybe we can get a real live TOPA. And by the way, last time I was here, there is a TOPA in state law, and it applies to Section 8. And so we already have it. And again, to the extent that in your districts there may be projects, Section 8 projects that are expiring, I want to encourage that, you know, TOPA concept there, because it already is in state law, and we can get a real live TOPA and then maybe, you know, move forward on that basis. But the point of my comment was I did want to indicate to the Housing Committee, this is an easy one. It's already the law. It's just a matter of enforcement. And what we're talking about is the rights of tenants and conversions. And I know, Herb, that you wanted to equalize the treatment, this was a couple years ago now, between tenants and conversions and tenants and demolitions. Never really quite got there yet, but hopefully we can still continue. But right now, the law was, and Gail Goldberg put this through, and that's the documentation I gave before you, it is the law that tenants and conversions, they have a unique right. Assuming they were there when the tract map application was filed and approved, the tenant, can unilaterally terminate and collect their relocation money. They don't have to wait for the landlord to terminate their tenancy. And yet the housing department, and the reason why I gave you the housing department cover sheet there, they don't tell the tenants that. And in the last year alone, I think last information from Gail Goldberg was something like 90 conversions basically went through. And, if you assume 10 tenants a unit, that's 900, 1,000 people. I would say, percentage-wise, a very small amount of people even knew that they had this right. I would like the housing department, Herb, and committee to be told. Maybe write them a letter, maybe have Mercedes or somebody come in and just explain what the impediment here is in terms of letting people know it's already the law. My request is that and Rob Gluchon, as a matter of fact, Herb, called me up and he says, Noel, even if you call the hotline, they don't give you the accurate information. They tell you can only collect your money if there's a notice of termination, and that's not true in conversions. So in letting the committee know, and the law that I gave you, just basically supports that. So that's the essence of my suggestion today, and I appreciate your consideration for that, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to have Andrew look into that. Thank you. Ms. Barclay, why don't we do now, I think it brings us to items 5A and 5B. If we can do them together.
Yes, sir. Item 5A is a report from the CRA and the CAO and the Chief Legislative Analyst relative to cooperation agreement with the Community Development Department in the amount of $21.9 million for acquisition pre-development activities regarding the Marlton Square mixed-use development. And item 5B is a report from CDD and also the CAO and CLA relative to an agreement with the CRA to partially fund the acquisition of land parcels comprising the retail component of the Marlton Square project.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Well, I want to call a representative from the mayor's office, Krista Williams-Phipps, to come forward. Good morning, and maybe I'll let you go before these guys.
Okay, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I just have a very brief statement. Again, as you know, I'm Krista Williams-Phipps. I represent South LA on the business team in the mayor's office. And I just wanted to offer the mayor's support for the completion of Marlton Square. As many of you know, it's been around for a long time and has evolved into an eyesore and really a nuisance. And our understanding is that the action that's on the agenda today will enable the city to have more of a role in moving the project forward, and we want to support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Lisa Johnson-Smith, City Administrative Officer. Before you is a report from a request from CDD and CRA to execute and negotiate a cooperation agreement to use a total of $21.9 million in previously approved HUD funds. These funds will enable CRA to acquire property in the retail component of the Marlton Square project and to pay for acquisition, relocation, pre-development, soft costs, as well as to pay for purchase options on properties that they are unable to acquire. CDD must draw the Betty grant funds down by September 25th, 2008 to meet a September 30th disbursement deadline. Failure to meet the deadline would result in permanent loss of the Betty and the companion Section 108 loan funds. Included in the request is a total of $21.9 million, which includes a $2.7 million CDBG funds that CDD requests to be reprogrammed. Those monies have been previously allocated to the project, but were reprogrammed away from the project in October 2007 due to a failure of the project to move forward. And current policy provides for all programs and accounts to be reviewed for savings by the mayor's office with the assistance of CDD and held until the next CDBG funding cycle. So at this time, our report does not address the $2.7 million CDBG funds, reducing the total amount to $19.2 million in Betty, Eddie, and Section 108 loan funds. There's no impact to the general funds. The HUD funds represent funds from the federal government and are collateralized against the future CDBG entitlements. Should these funds be used in an ineligible activity, repayment would come from non-federal dollars. In addition, the CRA and CD are requesting Section 108 loan debt service for 16 years out of 20 years, and to be repaid from an allocation of $1.2 million from CDBG funds in the future, starting 4 years from now, as well as they requested 49% of project-generated site-specific tax revenue to be used to pay for approximately $200,000 to $300,000 per year of that debt service. And those authorities had been previously approved in a project in 2004 by the mayor and the council. However, that project was a different deal. At that time, there was a retail developer. It was a gap financing economic development project. At this time, the retail portion of the project that was approved in 2004, they were unable to secure 8 parcels on the retail side, and therefore the implementation development was never executed between the retail developer and the CRA. So at this time, the CRA has introduced a new land acquisition strategy at this time where they will be the subrecipients of the funds and use those to purchase land parcels. Our office recommends that instead of using site-specific revenue at this time, that instead that we use Assembly Bill 1290 funds from 7 project areas located in the CRA South Los Angeles region, and there are sufficient funds over the 20-year period would be enough to pay that debt service. We also recommend that in the future, the $1.2 million CDBG, as well as the AB 1290 funds, be revisited within the next 4 years, which is the timeline that CRA and CDD needs to acquire a developer, execute agreements, and move into project construction and get the project done to generate sales tax.
So how many years did you just say?
They're saying 4 years. 4 years. We recommend that during that time period, these 2 funding sources be revisited as additional potential funding sources are identified. And there's a list of potential funding sources. CRA has put forward 2 options. One, they're looking at raising the tax increment cap in their Crenshaw project area, which is currently capped at $500,000. They have to negotiate with the county, then come back to the mayor and the council and the board for approval. If that is approved, there's potential money there up to $1 million to be used. In addition, they're also looking at merging several project areas in the South LA region, and if that does happen, they can increase the bonding capacity and potentially develop some money from that bonding capacity increase. So those are 2 different options. In the other agreement that we had 4 years ago with the retail developer, the city had negotiated some profit participation agreements, where if there was some additional project income above a percentage or a threshold, we would share in that profit. If the project was refinanced or sold at a later date and there was some profit above a percentage or a threshold, we would share in that profit. And if there's some land sales and potential profit coming from, or funds coming from those proceeds, we would also be looking at that as a potential funding source. So at this time, we would recommend that we have a recommendation that CRA and CDD report back every 90 days on the status of the project, looking for potential funding sources. There's also some litigation going on 3 components of the Marlton Square project relative to some foreclosure issues and bankruptcy issues, which CDD and CRA can get into more detail. But we recommend that they provide an update on those ongoing proceedings. At this time, we're told by CRA that those proceedings do not impact the retail component of this project. So the Marlton Square originally was a 4-component project. It was consisting of, from 2004, 180 units of senior housing, 140 units of single-family homes.
What's happening with the senior housing? What is it, the Buckingham?
The Buckingham
something
Place.
Senior project? What now?
It was called the Buckingham Place, and it was a component that was approved on a separate track than these other 3 components because it was fully funded. The developer had went forward. He was supposed to build 3 buildings, which totaled to 180 units. They were all going to be interconnected. However, the developer only built 1 building. That building turned out to be 97% complete. In February of this year, the developer lost his tax credits because he was unable to meet the requirements to keep those tax credits. So he fell behind schedule. As a result, we're understanding that it's going to be, CRA will speak more to that, but they're going to basically continue, and right now it's under foreclosure, but they're going to continue to get a new person and try to get those buildings built and the project on track.
What define 97% complete?
I think CRA should speak to that.
Yes, good morning. Don Spivak from the Redevelopment Agency. Let me first say that the Santa Barbara Plaza Marlton Square project is one of the most important projects that we have in South Los Angeles, and it has been unfortunately stalled by a number of setbacks over the course of the year. The action before you today, we think, will really put us in a position to get this project moving. It'll give us the ability to acquire some of the key properties.
Yes.
I'm sorry. This project is very old. It has a lot of complications. You just said you think that if we take the action that is recommended today, you think it'll put the project back on track. The thing that I'm suspect about, how many times has that been told to the legislative body of this city over these years? I think if we just do this one thing, I think we're going to be back on track. I think if we just do this one thing, I think we're going to be just fine. I think if we just do this one thing, I have a funny feeling this isn't the first time that somebody has told the legislative body of this city, I think on this project, if we just do this one thing, everything's going to be better now. What does that mean?
Councilman Cardenas, if I may. Celia Solano, Chief Executive Officer of the Community Redevelopment Agency of Los Angeles. That's true. In the previous administration, they'd come back to this body, at least on one occasion, to revise the deal terms with the previous developer. We're taking a completely different approach. We're sending, instead of working with the developer that people acknowledge was undercapitalized, that has had some failings in other portions of the project, which we terminated an agreement with because they failed to be able to secure the 8 remaining parcels. We're saying let's do old-fashioned redevelopment, where we go in, we buy the land, we get a developer, we have a competitive process to get a developer on board that is well capitalized that can pull off this project. That's the significant difference here. This legislative body endorsed this approach when you enabled us to use $5 million in acquisition funds to buy a critical portion of this property, the swap meet site on the corner. That's like the #1 corner site of the retail development project. The action being contemplated today would enable the redevelopment agency, in partnership with CDD, to purchase other significant parcels in the retail portion of the project. That way, CRA, the city, controls the deal. We're not dependent on a developer to use their persuasive abilities and to try to get financing to buy these difficult parcels. We've gone in, we've worked with the community that has been long awaiting these commitments. We've been able to negotiate deal terms with them, and we're able to buy up these properties, which the previous developer was unable to secure. This is about whether or not the city believes this is a significant project for South LA. This is unconventional. This is not typically how we would do it, but this has always been an unconventional project. So I would say this, I know the mayor's office has spoken on this behalf, and I don't know if Council District 8 would like to speak, but it is one of the primary projects in the South Los Angeles plan that the 4 council members representing South Los Angeles and the mayor have endorsed. This is an eyesore. We need to fix it. I can't tell you, then guarantee you that this is going to fix it, but it's probably the best chance we have of doing it because it'll put the city in the driver's seat rather than a developer. And that's really where we are in this market. We know there's interest from retail developers in coming in and developing a retail project on this site. The hardest part has been assembling these 8 parcels. By allowing us to use this money, we'll be able to start assembling all of those 8 parcels, one by one by one. And we have willing sellers, with the exception of Mr. Jerry Edwards, and he's going to come back into the project, and we've known about Jerry for 15, 20 years now. So
We'll have Miss Perry deal with Jerry.
I wouldn't wish that on Ms. Perry or anyone, really.
But the thing is, you're describing the potential for control, or is it some semblance of control, or legal control?
It would be legal control. Right now, we don't, other than the swap meet site, we've not owned a speck of property here. We've never owned any property, and that's been the difficulty in moving this development forward. We've been dependent on a developer who was undercapitalized to try to acquire these sites. It would have been difficult for anyone to do this, and the developer was unfortunately unsuccessful. And so the agreement with that developer was terminated 2 years ago. But now we have an opportunity to go in and purchase these sites, to control the land. And the money that is going to be dedicated to the purchase.
Please help me understand, help this committee understand. When you say control the land, you're talking
Buy
about
the land, fee title of the land.
But hold on, are you talking about the entirety of the project or portions of the project?
That's what we're asking for. We have one site, there are 7 remaining that we need to acquire. The proposal today would allow us to take down 2 more parcels, and if we're able to obtain additional financing, which we would like, that's on the table, we would be able to buy up options on the remainder of the parcels, other than Mr. Edwards. We would then have options for the remaining parcels, and we would have ownership on, I'm sorry, I don't know if they have this map.
So basically,
But
you're
basically,
talking about...
we would own the entire frontage of Martin Luther King, and that is the retail development site for Marlton Square. Prior to that, we've not owned that. We only own the corner parcel.
So the path that you're describing today has to do with the portions of properties along
Correct.
Martin Luther King.
Correct.
Now, who would control the other sites adjacent to this that still need development?
Okay. The other sites, remember, and I think that Lisa did a terrific job kind of outlining that there are 4 different components. There was to be the senior site. We're in
Okay,
foreclosure.
now,
Okay.
getting back to my original question.
What happened with the senior site?
I want to just get the quick answer, then Mr. Cardenas, I will let you continue. What does 90, I don't understand 97% complete. I don't
97%
understand.
complete means the units on the first floor are fully completed. They're carpeted, they have the appliances and everything installed. The units on the second floor are all but a few of them are in the same state. The units on the third floor are roughed out. Some of them have carpets in them, and some of them have the utilities, the toilets and refrigerators installed, and others do not.
And that's
The
only,
building, the shell of the building is otherwise complete.
that's 3%. And
There was
why-
one building out of the 3 that...
I understand.
But of that building, yeah.
That building is in that state. It needs at this point to have the remaining toilets, refrigerators, things like that installed to complete that building.
So now, who at this juncture is responsible for the completing doing the last 3%?
We are proceeding on foreclosing on the property, on the developer, and that's one of the proceedings that Lisa mentioned, is that we are proceeding to foreclose on the property. Our plan has been to foreclose and then to be able to put this out to a new developer, do a competitive process, and have a new developer come on board. They can re-syndicate the deal and complete it. And we have quite a bit of interest in that project.
So this new developer would complete the senior project.
Complete that first building and do a second building as well, and re-syndicate and get that tax equity.
In the event that the senior project was complete, done, would it have to wait for the other phases before you could
Absolutely
move
not.
No, it
people
wouldn't.
in?
They're completely separate projects.
And do we have an estimate as to the cost what is it going to take to do the last 3%? What is that?
We believe it's about $1.3 million.
1.3 million.
No, I'm sorry, that includes the second building, to complete this building and to build the second
Wait,
floor.
yeah, no, I want, how much do you believe that it would cost to complete this, just the 3%? I don't want to know about
About
the other.
$500,000.
And if we had that, then you could actually start moving people into this
If we
structure.
had the building completed, we would be able to have people move into the building.
But in order to do that, I mean, there's not some arrangements that could be made with the current person just to,
They've been forced into involuntary bankruptcy.
yeah, and then I remember you telling me that. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
see if there's, I mean, it seems like we're so close.
Absolutely. It's frustrating because they were so close to finishing, and if they had just finished at the beginning of this year, we'd be done with Buckingham.
And I know that Mr. Parks would be very pleased in the event that this complex would open. It just seems like there's a quicker way, and you're telling me there's not?
Not now.
Not now that he's been forced into bankruptcy. And his lender, his primary lender, has also been foreclosing on him. So we have a creditor committee between Hanmi Bank and the city, and we've had a creditor committee with LHD, CDD, CRA, and Hanmi Bank on how to manage this default. It's not just our debt, it's also Hanmi Bank that I think is out $17 million. $17 million. So it's been about how to manage the foreclosure of this project to ensure that a new developer could come in, re-syndicate the project, complete it, and pay off this.
So it would be too simple to suggest that if the city had $500,000 somewhere that we could go in there and complete.
That's correct, because there's senior debt on it, and that's the $17 million from Hanmi Bank.
Okay, Mr. Cardenas, and then Mr. Reyes.
Basically, the dialogue you just had with the chairman, you're clarifying for us that one of the key elements right now is that we have to admit that we've given up on this particular developer. Once this particular developer is out of the picture, then with the mechanisms that require that to legally take place, then it makes sense to, for the last $500,000 to be invested, somebody else take on the project, they become the responsible party and owner and keeping the commitment for years on forward of providing this kind of housing for the community, et cetera. So the bottom line is that is taking place, but that could take 6 more months, 18 more months, because I'm sure, even though this
exactly
developer
right.
seems like he's at the end of his financial rope, lawyers know how to drag these processes on very, very long.
Exactly right.
Are we
Councilman
getting
Cardenas.
cooperation now where this person is realizing it's time to hang it up? Or is it the kind of thing where it is just dragging on and dragging on?
Okay. Yeah, this is Tom Weber, our counsel on this. It's really the creditors and the contractors that have, to which he has obligations, that are making this difficult by forcing the bankruptcy. They have mechanics liens on the property, they're forced them into bankruptcy, and then you have the creditors, the $17 million that Hanmi Bank is out. So there are a number of folks that want to see their money repaid, and that's what complicates the
Can I
matter.
jump in for 1 second? Because I'm glad you went down this line of questioning, though. But, so they have liens on the property, so they own pieces of the action. I mean, they legally. It's not, would not their investment go up, be, more maximized in the event that the structure was complete? They wouldn't want to work with us to complete it?
Mr. Wesson, Chairman Wesson, you're absolutely right. That's why they have been working with us.
So
to
the creditors have been.
They have been working with us, but again, it's complicated. Us just putting 500, and we have not, by the way, we're not proposing to put 500.
I know,
that's,
but I'm
that's
just-
not this matter at all.
just
but,
asking.
We have worked out a plan with the creditors where we would foreclose on the property, we would re-syndicate it with the new developer, who would then be able to get this additional
Yeah, but
infusion
like
of
Mr.
equity.
Cardenas said, that's 18 months or something, or
It
could
could be 6 months, it could be a year. I'm being completely honest with you. It was complicated when he was forced into involuntary bankruptcy. That's what really complicated it, because we were on...
This, Mr. Cardenas, a real frustrating situation. CD8, Mr. Parks in particular, has, pulled out his hair to try to make this happen. And if there was a creative way in which we could make this happen sooner rather than later, I know I'd like to be in a position to help Mr. Parks have a success. So it's just frustrating.
I'm done.
Frustrating hearing that it doesn't look like this is going to happen quick, fast, and in a hurry. Mr. Reyes?
Okay.
And then Eric wants to-
Oh, I got you.
So I really
Thanks,
think
Cecilia. Good staff work.
I really think this area needs this kind of injection. That we know the market behaves the way it does, and there was a valiant effort to put something together here. We're at these crossroads now. Just in terms of understanding the larger roadmap that we're going to be taking. In the report on page 4, we talk about the Marlton Square mixed development. There's on point 5 in your summary, it says that the total acquisition, relocation, demolition budget, including holding and transaction costs, is approximately $38,800,000, of which public sources outlined above comprise approximately $27.1 million, and the future retail developers share comprise approximately $11.7 million. And then today, we're acting on $21.8 million, correct?
That's correct.
So we still will have, after this, a gap of $6 million, $7 million?
That's correct. And there are some additional CDBG funds, as I think Lisa had mentioned, that 2.7 that had been reallocated away, so that's 2.7 there. There's also additional capacity of Section 108 borrowing that we could use to, again, acquire additional properties or at least tie them up. We're going to need some other capital sources, and we're looking at a developer, we don't have one particularly in mind, that would come in and help finance the remainder of it. But this would give us control of key parcels, which again is something we haven't had before and has made it quite difficult to market this project.
So the RFP would be structured where we have control of the land. This is where all this money is going towards, is acquisition.
Right.
And whatever's left to finish, given
Relocation and
all the conditions as after the foreclosure and after moving the former developer out.
Foreclosure is on the Buckingham side, so now we're talking about the retail portion,
Okay.
which is about trying to acquire parcels along King. Right. So the $27.1 million would go to land acquisition, relocation, assistance, as far as we can take it, to get as many of those properties tied up and purchased as we can. And then if we can get this additional funding that we've discussed, the CDBG as well as the additional Section 108 lending capacity, then that'll allow us to get options on the additional parcels. Then, if we put this out for development, it's a very attractive package for a developer because they don't have to go through really what's been the most difficult part about this, which is getting these last 8 parcels.
So that would be the magnet then.
That's it.
That's
That's
what
the
we
magnet.
think will attract someone who would want to enter this, what some might perceive as quicksand. It's,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's,
Correct.
so we have to make it that much more attractive.
That's correct.
Wow.
And I mean, I guess like an analogy that will work. It's not actually, it's complicated because of the history, but this approach is very similar to what we did on Westlake Theater. We went in and we bought it. We own the land. Now we can control the type of development that will occur. It's the same model. It's just complicated because this has a complicated history. But we think getting back to the basics of redevelopment will help us pull this deal off.
Will this posture that we could assume, will that give us the potential of creating, how can I say this, a greater standard for a community benefit package since so much public money is going into this?
Oh, the deal would be completely new. I mean, we can craft whatever community benefits package we see fit. It's really just, again, in the past, there was a previous deal that had its bells and whistles. That deal's now dead, so it's a clean slate. And we can put together job training, we can put together first source hire.
I'm trying to stay positive
living
here, so
wage. Yeah, I mean,
we're maintaining the positive angle here is.
Absolutely.
Once we get past this threshold, the returns over time can hopefully offset what we put in here.
I think that's right.
I think I just need to state publicly that in the front end, looks like we're digging a deep hole and we're filling it in with all these government subsidies. But once we get out of that hole, the returns can offset the costs we put into.
I think that's right. And certainly for the community, to get rid of this eyesore will give tremendous benefit in their surrounding community.
I know this is scenario building, this is more of trying to tell the future here, but couldn't we lay down certain assumptions and actually articulate some of those benefits over time?
Yes.
So that we can at least put within the dialogue that the heavy lifting we're doing now and the burden that we're carrying will actually have a multiplier effect in the future. Now, what are those multiplier effects? I mean, the what-if scenarios. Could someone in your staff do that for us? Because we're going to have to defend our actions today.
I understand.
This is like 20-something million on one shot. And yeah, I've already had others come to me and say, well, if you can do that for that area and that project, why can't you do this for this area? And I need to respond, look, let's understand the history of these different parts of the city, and we need that infusion there now, because we've been sitting on it for too long.
Yeah.
But can we have some kind of scenario building of what could happen,
Yes, we could. I mean,
given what this investment will do for us?
we can certainly put together at least the type of development that we anticipate will occur, the number of jobs that might be created, the fact that the construction jobs created alone will be jobs under our local hire construction careers program. We expect living wage jobs on many of the retail jobs. We expect this to be LEED silver at a minimum. I mean, all of the benefits that we expect from a project today would be applied to this project. And those are substantial. And moreover, it would remove a significant blight in this community.
See, but we need to quantify that.
Okay.
We need to let people know why we are behaving the way we are behaving. This is not welfare for the corporate sector.
That's correct.
This is not welfare for the developers. this is an investment in an area that needs it, and it's going to have X, Y, Z benefit quantified in this manner because it's going to accomplish this. I mean, we need to have that kind of substance because right now it looks like we're just throwing money at folks and hoping that something sticks on the wall.
Right.
And that's just, you know, I don't believe that's what we're doing here today.
We'll get back to you and give you better numbers than that. I mean, but in essence, we're looking at a 150,000 square foot retail development, sit-down restaurant, probably significant retail. This is a site, to be quite frank with you, we think would make an excellent site for a Costco, for example, that could throw off enormous sales tax revenues, and those are great paying jobs.
See,
And those are the types of scenarios, and we could quantify those for you, give you different types of scenarios with jobs, with multiplier effects on the economy. If that is of assistance, we're happy to do that, Councilman.
See, in essence, in my mind, that area is bleeding to death because the dollars that are there today
escaping.
are leaking out into surrounding areas. If we can plug that hole, heal that wound, and say how this site will bring that money back because it's going to have this type of benefit, I mean, those are the kinds of multipliers we should be looking at. And I think that would help at least understand why we're doing what we're doing. But it is creating a positive impact for an area, but more importantly, it's creating a regional message that it's desirable to be here, desirable to shop here, and we're taking care of the city. So, but we need to have that because right now we're just hearing all the negative. So I think our actions today has to be able to spell out that impact, that economic multiplier impact.
Heard loud and clear.
Thank you.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions for the CAO about some of the funding here. The Section 108 loan, part of my understanding of the guarantee is the additional, well, actually, the question I have, is this additional or the same CDBG guarantees that we have waiting for the project? Are we moving those over as guarantees? Or are we putting, I know there's a section that I'll get to in a second that's proposed new CDBG, but just the piece on Section 108 guarantee, is that existing CDBG money that's already been in that line item, no more?
Well, the Section 108 loan has the repayment of CDD estimate the repayment to be about $1.4 million at a 5.5% interest rate. We won't know what the actual repayment will be until HUD sets the bonds and does permanent bond offering. So we anticipated that based on the $1.45 million, we would use $1.22 million of block grant, which is subject to an annual allocation by the mayor and the council so that happens in a 4-year period.
So annually, 1.22 million
Yes.
in block grant, and
For a
that's
16-year period of time.
Is that a new allocation being proposed today? Because I know in past
This is
we
slightly
passed
less
it in the
than
past.
this is slightly less than what the previous deal had been. This is slightly less than what the previous deal had been.
The cumulative amount over the 16-year period of time is roughly the same, because the loan before in the prior deal was same block grant.
It's not a new allocation.
It was still same block grant future allocation, but it was
Right.
over a 17.5-year
Right,
term.
and we passed that. I just want to make sure that it's not going further with new block grant money. It may be a little bit less. It's the existing money that we had already, as a committee and council,
Right.
approved.
It's a total
So
of-
the action today is not, it's reallocating, but it's not new allocation of new funds.
No, it's
Okay.
the same
Okay.
as from
Thank you.
last time.
The second question, the new CDBG that is in here, let me get the page. This is on page 5 of the CRA report, where it has at the top, after the subtotal CDBG grant funds, proposed for mid-year reprogramming in future years, not committed this time. Walk me through that and what action we're actually taking, because, I mean, for the committee and for the chair and for everybody else, if we're walking through 2.7, if we're basically giving the authority before we do our block grant look of 2.7 going out the door right now, potentially, I know it's not committed at this time, but in taking some action, are we committing to commit to it? What is this here?
Well, the 2.7 is not included in our report in terms of the the committee taking action today. In 2002, money was committed to this project, upfront infusion of a total actually of $3.6 million originally. That was subsequently reduced to the $2.7 million. The difference of the $900,000
So this is the CRA line item that you guys have had, and it would be potentially drawn from again?
Well, right, it was originally allocated in the consolidated plan. In October 2007, the $2.7 million was reprogrammed to other projects because the
so it has
project
been-
hadn't moved forward.
So this is a new allocation. It has
So
been
it would be a new,
reprogrammed.
it's a request for an allocation, yes, but it was something that they had in the past that they lost.
But we're not moving on that today in
Not
your
today.
report.
That's right.
Okay.
Because the funds need to be identified and what are, basically, we're looking for that to happen
Can
in
this
the
deal
normal
work
process.
without that? Because if we're saying let's move ahead with this, we might not be allocating it today, but folks will return. I'm not saying that we won't approve it, but I want to do this eyes wide open. They're going to say, look, we have a 2.7 shortfall. We now have no obligation but to find this.
Well, it has to go through the normal CDBG process,
Of
which would
course,
be
but
the
we,
programming
I don't
or
think this
the-
committee is going to kill the whole project over 2.7 million that we now have.
Probably the difference of being able to acquire right now one additional parcel, as opposed to, say, optioning it.
It may have great motivations, and I may be
mean,
for them. I just need to do this eyes wide open that, let's be honest with ourselves. If we're saying, we'll try to find it in future years, if we're saying we want this to move forward as structured and as estimated by the CRA, we're going to have to do this, unless you can find 2.7 million somewhere else in the city budget that I don't know about. So I just want us to be eyes wide open on that we're adding $2.7 million here. The 2.7 from CDBG in past years that was allocated towards this has been reprogrammed. If we move forward with this today, we're not authorizing it, but the chair is going to have 2.7 million less for everything else in the city when that comes around later in the consolidated plan, is my understanding. And that's fine if we want to do that. I just want to put that on the record. The increased bonding capacity that's also outlined, if there's the consolidation of the South Los Angeles stuff as well, South Los Angeles project areas, how likely is that? That's also an important part of this, and I want to know, where that is. When's that coming before the board? How likely is that? Again, these are all deal killers in some ways if we don't do all these things, so.
We're in an extensive public process on that right now, and Mr. Spivak can speak more to that directly, but in essence, the action that needs to be taken is by the council only. It doesn't require approval of another body. Certainly, we want to make sure it's something that's supported by the community, that makes sense, but that's something that in essence the council controls. And the council member has been supportive of the proposal. So it's about making sure we have strong community support and it makes sense to the community to do this.
And sorry to put it on the spot, but Mr. Chair, Ms. Perry as well, you're supportive of that consolidation of the South Los Angeles project areas and using the increased bonding capacity here? Okay.
I'm not sure that I am supportive of that. I've been talking to my own groups, weighing the pros and cons of it, but I haven't taken a position on it yet.
Okay, and the only reason I'm asking some of this is obviously that, the future is kind of written in some ways if we move forward, even though we're not approving all these things to happen. This is how we've gotten here with Marlton. I used to chair this committee. When we get to that point, with just one more thing that we need. I know that there's a new approach. I trust the people that are behind this approach and all of that. But each time, it's obligations that we put forward. And if we don't do it, we kill the deal. So we keep throwing one more thing on, and one more thing on, and one more thing on. There may be things you can't see today, that none of us can see today, that is going to be another log that we have to throw on the fire. And I just want to be clear about where that wood's going to come from, and whose trees are being chopped down to continue the
An analogy.
overused metaphor.
Keep going.
Yeah. All right. That's all the questions I have.
Okay, since there are no more questions on the matter,
If I might add, Adrian Garcia from the CLA's office. We're supportive of the agency's and CDD's actions, and just want to reiterate that our concern was the use of the SSTR prematurely. Usually in our practice, we use the SSTR when we have a deal put together, and that's what we substituted that with the AB 1290, and the council office is supportive of using AB 1290 funds. On another note, subsequent to a release of a report, CDD and CRA were requesting some technical wording amendments. We will address those when this matter goes to council, so we can be clear. The recommendation will be clear for council to act.
thank you. This has been a pretty interesting and informative discussion. We all recognize that this is a challenging project, to say the least, and there's no surefire way to proceed. Maybe what we can do to try to minimize the problems that we've been having, which was suggested to me in a sidebar conversation with some of my colleagues, Cecilia, that we have you report back every 60 days to let us know, basically what's going on, where it relates to the acquisition, where it relates to the design.
We would welcome that.
Mr. Reyes, what else? I mean, because we think we should make specific requests as to what we want you to report back on. And I know we said acquisition, we said design, and
Also look at financing sources, the status of financing sources.
Okay.
The status of financing sources, we'll know what we have in front of us. The actual financial uses, how we're going, you got the sources?
Right. The uses are all acquisition and relocation.
Okay.
But we can, yeah.
We want to know how the money's being used and where it's
Absolutely.
flowing.
Okay.
So it's both ends of the spectrum. And then we have legal status, what is the legal condition in that moment in terms of impact on the project.
Good.
Then last is if we can talk about new design, what's the status of that design and the entitlement? If we're talking about changing in zones, changing in uses.
Right.
Because that in of itself will have its own timeframes, and that'll affect the financing as well.
Absolutely. Okay.
Okay, Ms. Perry may want to add.
Legal actions that are pending and status of those actions, even if we have to go into closed session on it, and how that interrelates to the progress of the project.
Great.
So, Mr. Clerk, you have that information. Again, if we can stay as a committee on top of this, then hopefully we can, provide you with the assistance. So at the end of the day, we have a successful project. Because I mean, it would be a definite feather in our cap, but we don't want it to become a I would say white elephant, but it's not even that. I mean, so there are kids listening. So anyway,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
so then, without objection, on item 5A, we'll adopt the CLA report, and on item 5B, we will adopt the CAO report, and we will, the amendments where they will report back every 60 days with this specific request that were made from members of this committee. So without objection, that'll be the order. The last item, I think the last item for today is item 15. Cecilia, you may not want to go far. I think this is you. Ms. Barclay?
Item 15 is a presentation by the Chief Executive Officer of the CRA relative to the governor's proposal to take redevelopment funds and its projected impact on the CRA's work programs and budget.
In better news.
Yeah, I'm going to say to Andrew, who works with me and staffs me on this committee, next time, let's only do one, negative. Can we just do one headache per agenda and to do these back? We have to meet once a day, Mr. Gardner says. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I know that you all have been following quite closely the state budget deliberations, and what I'm going to do is give you just a general overview, and then I'm going to ask Glenn Wasserman to talk about how this proposal that the governor, as well as the majority and minority party, have all proposed in their budget proposals to take funds from redevelopment. The Republican proposal was voted down both in the Senate and the Assembly, and that was a very substantial proposal, so we're not going to talk about that because we think that's dead. But the important thing is all of those parties have proposed to take of redevelopment funds, and it differs from past funds, past takes, and we're going to have Mr. Wasserman explain that to you.
So anyway, given that Mr. Cardenas and I have a little bit of experience,
Just a little bit.
He's got a lot where he had to deal with it for several years. The reality of the situation is if it's in the governor's proposal, if it's in the Assembly proposal or the Democratic proposal and the GOP proposal, we can all but be assured that that is going to occur, wouldn't you say? And anyway, Mr. Cardenas, you may want to.
I just got off the phone with one of the legislators and asked them specifically about this matter, and along the lines of what the former speaker just said, the chairman of the committee, it's in the governor's budget. We all understand the $16 billion, give or take, who you're talking to up in the legislature about the gap that they've had to fill in this particular budget cycle, it's very unlikely that they were going to leave us unscathed.
That's right.
That's local government. And this is something that isn't, some people interpret is not the spirit of the initiatives that were passed to protect local government funding. And so it's very likely that some semblance of a figure is going to be affected here. Now, 5% seems to be what they're talking about right now in the governor's budget. It's very likely that it's not going to go above that. The best we can expect that the Democrats who are holding on this item and in favor of our argument to reduce it to zero, hopefully they'll get there, and if they don't, maybe they'll have a little bit of success. But as of right now, the only ones holding out to protect these funds for local government, these CR redevelopment funds, are the Democrats. Fortunately, who hold a majority, but unfortunately, it's a 2/3 vote in California, so that means that there's going to probably be some compromise. So as of a few minutes ago, it looks like this is still on the table. There are the leadership factions on the majority side of both houses are claiming that they're going to protect this and take it off the table, but again, that means that they have to figure out where else they're going to fill this gap, and that's all they're doing right now. They're looking at this, I don't think they're looking at this from the governor's office as a policy point. They're looking at it as a line item.
Right. Councilman Cardenas, I appreciate that update, because that has not been something we'd heard, so really appreciate that.
But see, at the end of the day, when a budget, Mr. Cardenas again and I have been up there, you have these, in fact, the only good thing about this year's budget is that it broke my record as having the longest stalemate. So now I've got that off of my back. So that's the only.
Not in that record book.
Eliminate, replaced by another representative of the 47th district, and she's a much better person than I. But and I mean that, she's great. When this thing comes together, it's going to come together quickly, and where it relates to us, I think we won't be given a second thought.
That's right.
Because they're going to want to quickly do this and do it, so we need to operate. We need to try to see if there's a way to minimize. We need to go in and start doing that negotiation, in my opinion, as of now, to try to mitigate our hit, because there will be a hit. So I say all of this to say that I don't think that you need to go through all the bells and whistles.
No, I wasn't.
Let's just cut right to the quick, and how much, and what do you think, and how does it affect us, and this, that, and the other.
Okay, 3 quick points. One, the difference this year is that in the past, when there's been an ERAF take, they've extended the deadlines of project areas. They've extended the life of project. That's not happening. So we can't make up the funds in later years. There has been no extension proposed in the life of project areas. That is very significant. We can't make it up once it goes out the door.
Wait a minute. That's an important point. Who is communicating that on behalf of the city of Los Angeles to the governor's office and the legislature? So even if they actually take these funds, the least they should do is give that extension.
Yes, Councilman Cardenas.
Who's communicating that to them?
We've communicated that to the mayor's office. We've communicated that to anybody who will listen to that.
Is there a representative here from the mayor's office that's up to speed on that issue?
I don't see anybody from Ligar here.
Yeah, but the way the charter reads now,
And
the
we've
revised
also been in
charter,
communication with
the
the
mayor's
CLA.
office is in charge of communicating with other levels of government external to the city of Los Angeles. Correct, Mr. President?
They're in charge of the lobbyists, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I find it hard to believe that we're not getting a presentation, including the messengers for the city, which is the mayor's office, on this matter. Nobody from the mayor's office is here to talk on this? No, to speak on this item?
It would appear not. So what I will do is make an official request to have them come in and talk about that. Now, getting back to
That was one point.
we'll let you get there.
Yeah.
Mr. Cardenas, given our experience, that would appear to be something that we could negotiate on.
Yeah.
That would be tremendously helpful.
No, I
Because
mean,
that's the most frightening part for us.
If we have a contingent of let's say Democrats, LA delegation in particular, that does not seem like an ask that is out of the realm.
What I'm going to do is work with Cecilia on emergency reso. Obviously, there's an urgency here. There's no question about that.
If you want, under Rule 64, you can do that in committee, because this has come up because of the briefing that they have.
And they could pass a budget in 5 minutes. They could pass a budget in an hour. They could convene today and be done tonight. So there's an urgency.
We should do that.
Okay, so on that point of the extension, we need to be able to communicate that immediately to the legislature on behalf of the legislative body here. So
what do we have to do, Mr. City Attorney?
How would we do that in committee?
It says Rule 23 for committees. There's a Rule 64 if you want to do it now.
Okay.
Okay, so Mr.
I want to exercise a Rule 64 so that we can give that communication and make that communication on the floor today.
So
correct?
you move.
Let's make like we do in council, let's make the findings that, that this has come up to us,
That's subsequent to the posting.
subsequent to the posting of the agenda. And, as part of that, I would move that we take this up as urgent and make those findings. If there's no objection.
Okay, so let it.
For us, you can make them.
So let it be written. So let it be done. Let's move.
So that'll be a document that comes out of this committee to the floor, and then we would have to do the Rule 23 on the floor today if we want to go through it today.
You know what? You know what we should do? Let's. This is what we want to do, Mr. City Attorney. But we're going to put this. This is like a ball. It's in the air. We're going to see what the other two concerns that Cecilia has, and if there's a way that we can, we may or may not add something else to it. So let's hear your other 2 points.
Okay. The second point is, although you keep hearing the number 5% thrown around, this is the chart we provided to you. I think everybody has it, and it kind of goes through the pass-throughs. At the end of the day, if you go through the gross tax increment we receive every year, there are a number of fixed payments we have to make, pass-through payments. We have to take aside 20% of our low and moderate income. We have debt service. We have labor and overhead, which I can tell you we're very lean. We have encumbrances that the council and the board have already committed to this year. When you take that all away, that 5% hit actually becomes a 12% hit on your net tax increment. So that means that for your project areas, you will have 12% less to spend from this net tax increment on projects. And we're not talking about affordable housing. We're talking about regular economic development projects. It's a 12% hit, not a 5% hit. I think that's very important for the committee to understand.
Is that in perpetuity, or is it for this?
Well, the proposals are for 3 years, but, and I, again, former speaker here, there's no, I have no confidence it will be for only 3 years. We think this could be a permanent hit. But again, 5% translates into a 12% hit on what you would spend on economic development.
So are there any things that have been worked out in your shop that could be done that could reduce this 12% hit? If it's no, it's no.
No. I mean, this is how it translates. When you have all of our legal obligations, you take those all away, it's a 12% hit on the net. And then the third thing we want to point out is, again, if you look at what our gross tax increment would be is $42 million, you take away the 5% housing trust fund, which is, again, is out of our 80% money that the mayor's proposed, and I know the council has supported, but that's about 9.2. And then you take the state proposal of $10 million, we're talking that half of our net TI is going to be taken away. If you just take away the housing and you count the housing, it's a third. So depending on how you calculate it, we're losing.
Let me ask you this,
yeah, sorry.
Cecilia. You question that this may not be given back in 3 years. And why do you have those concerns?
Why don't I have those concerns?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just wonder, what's your reasoning? Why do you think that there's a chance that, or...
Glenn Wasserman, I'm Chief Operating Officer of CRA. As was mentioned earlier, there's at least a legal question about the ability of the state to do this. This is the tax increment financing is provided for in the California Constitution. The governor's proposal, the legislation that I've read, attempts to deal with that by saying, well, these are funds that are going to be going to education, and education is of benefit to the redevelopment project areas, and therefore it's okay for us to do this, although it would not result in any new additional money to education. It would be taken away.
Reason why I ask is, again, when this budget does come together, the legislators are going to feel bad, and to a certain degree, about the hit that the local governments take, because probably 80% of them come from local government. So they're going to want to do something that covers their backsides as well. We might want to consider some kind of additional language that would help us get our dough in 3 years. That might
Get it back, you mean?
Yeah, get it back. And
That
so
would be wonderful, I guess.
but I mean, I think we need, these are the things, and I guess it is, we should have some more dialogue with the mayor's office as well. Because see, these are the types of things that I think can be negotiated.
That's terrific.
And so if at the end of the day, when this thing begins to come together, if we can get some clarification language or commitment language or something that helps us legally ensure that we get this money. And I just believe that when they decide they want to move forward with this budget, that they will be flexible enough where we might be able to do that. So we need to, Mr. City Attorney, as we move forward with Mr. Cardenas's suggestion that this be an emergency item, we need to, somebody needs to quickly tinker around with some language that helps clarify and tries to ensure that we receive our the money within the time period that we're supposed to get it. I think Mr. Garcetti or Mr. Cardenas wanted to say something.
Well, the first point on that that motion would be to provide for, that the state legislature should provide for the extension should they take these dollars. Secondly, that they should also put language in there saying that their intent is to pay it back within 3 years. Yes.
I think there are several questions. First, there was a question as to whether or not the committee may introduce a motion or not.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rule 64 allows us to talk about it. If we did a motion, we could, but then I don't know if we could get it onto the council in time. It's kind of a, we'd have
So
to do
basically,
24
we
hours.
can instruct
So we're allowed to talk
staff.
about it now that we've made an urgency.
We can instruct the staff
determination.
to assist in drafting that for
Rule
council,
23
for a Rule
council.
23
We'll
in
do a Rule
council.
23 in council
Okay.
on it.
That would be my
Okay.
recommendation.
Yeah, our office can work with you on that
Okay.
between now and council.
So that's the first and second point, and then,
And need to find, make the necessary
Findings there,
findings.
too.
yeah, there, in,
As a vote on that initially and then on the motion. So-
Right.
The third point, if I may, everybody's talking about 3 years. I know you can't, in the legislature, you can never, but if there's at least a commitment that it's only going to be 3 years, that's what we greatly fear, that it's going to be a permanent take. Once they get away with it, they'll do it for,
they've done it before.
Yeah.
They've done it before.
Right.
We've done it before. They've
Yeah.
done it before.
I was sick on that day.
I was sick to my stomach, but I did it.
So you have one more item.
I think, I guess the last piece is whenever it happens and whatever it ends up being, we would come back to this committee and provide you some charts and some suggestions on how to divvy up the pain.
Basically, show us the new numbers and then
That's
some
right.
suggestions about how we should
That's
handle
right.
our
And
new world.
I want to be clear, it is up to
situation.
this council to figure that out. And one recommendation we would make, though, is that there are project areas that, right on their own, can't even support themselves from an operating standpoint. We just don't think it makes any sense to make them take a bigger hit. That would basically shut down operations in the South Los Angeles region and the Harbor region. So if we agree not to make them contribute, that means that the pain's greater for everybody else. And we're really clear about that. It's up to the council how to do it, but we can show you a number of alternatives. And again, we're going to basically just say, what do you want to do? And that's something that we encourage you to work with your regional administrators on. What does it actually translate into you for actual projects that might be slowed down or stopped? And we won't know till we know what the hit is. And that's our presentation.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. City Attorney, what do we need, how do we need to proceed at this point in order to begin a true discussion on the two areas that we talked about, some form of a city resolution or something?
I'm not sure there's any action that, there's no action the committee will take, but I believe that there will be, the steps will be taken out to make this as a motion in council under Rule 23.
And so, Meg, Ms. Barclay, your shop will work with whoever in order to get the proper wording or what have you.
Yes, sir. We can work with Mr. Cardenas's office to make sure that whatever motion is introduced
And then I'll
accommodates
second.
discussion
I'll
today.
second that motion. Okay, then, with that said, I want to thank you guys for today's presentation. Ms. Barclay, is there any more joyful business on today's
No,
committee?
sir.
No? Then this committee is adjourned. Gee.
Talked already? We're talking together?
It is.